"Oh, dear me!" cried the Lord Mayor. "God bless my soul and body! Oh, Lor! Well, there are great people at the bottom of these riots, you know. You really mustn't." "My lord," said Mr Haredale, "the murdered gentleman was my brother. I succeeded to his inheritance. There were not wanting slanderous tongues at that time to whisper that the guilt of this most foul and cruel deed was mine who loved him, as he knows in heaven, dearly. The time has come, after all these years of gloom and misery, for avenging him, and bringing to light a crime so artful and so devilish that it has no parallel. Every second's delay on your part loosens this man's bloody hands again, and leads to his escape. My lord, I charge you hear me, and despatch this matter on the instant." "Oh, dear me!" cried the chief magistrate. "These an't business hours, you know. I wonder at you. How ungentlemanly it is of you. You mustn't, you really mustn't. And I suppose you are a Catholic, too?" "I am," said Mr Haredale. "God bless my soul! I believe people turn Catholics a purpose to vex and worrit me," cried the Lord Mayor. "I wish you wouldn't come here. They'll be setting the Mansion House afire next, and we shall have you to thank for it. You must lock your prisoner up, sir. Give him to a watchman, and call again at a proper time. Then we'll see about it." Before Mr Haredale could answer, the sharp closing of a door, and drawing of its bolts, gave notice that the Lord Mayor had retreated to his bedroom, and that further remonstrance would be unavailing. The two clients retreated likewise, and the porter shut them out into the street. "That's the way he puts me off," said the old gentleman. "I can get no redress and no help. What are you going to do, sir?" "To try elsewhere," answered Mr Haredale, who was by this time on horseback. "I feel for you, I assure you; and well I may, for we are in a common cause," said the old gentleman. "I may not have a house to offer you to-night. Let me tender it while I can. On second thoughts, though," he added, putting up a pocket book he had produced while speaking, "I'll not give you a card, for if it was found upon you, it might get you into trouble. Langdale, that's my name, vintner and distiller, Holborn Hill. You're heartily welcome, if you'll come." Mr Haredale bowed and rode off, close beside the chaise as before, determining to repair to the house of Sir John Fielding, who had the reputation of being a bold and active magistrate, and fully resolved, in case the rioters should come upon them, to do execution on the murderer with his own hands, rather than suffer him to be released. They arrived at the magistrate's dwelling, however, without molestation, for the mob, as we have seen, were then intent on deeper schemes, and knocked at the door. As it had been pretty generally rumoured that Sir John was proscribed by the rioters, a body of thief-takers had been keeping watch in the house all night. To one of them Mr Haredale stated his business, which, appearing to the man of sufficient moment to warrant his arousing the justice, procured him an immediate audience. No time was lost in committing the murderer to Newgate, then a new building, recently completed at a vast expense, and considered to be of enormous strength. The warrant being made out, 3 of the thief-takers bound him afresh (he had been struggling, it seemed, in the chaise, and had loosened his manacles), gagged him, lest they should meet with any of the mob, and he should call to them for help, and seated themselves along with him in the carriage. These men, being all well armed, made a formidable escort; but they drew up the blinds again, as though the carriage were empty, and directed Mr Haredale to ride forward, that he might not attract attention by seeming to belong to it. The wisdom of this proceeding was sufficiently obvious; for as they hurried through the city, they passed among several groups of men, who, if they had not supposed the chaise to be quite empty, would certainly have stopped it; but those within keeping quite close, and the driver tarrying to be asked no questions, they reached the prison without interruption, and once there, had him out and safe within its gloomy walls in a twinkling. With eager eyes and strained attention, Mr Haredale saw him chained, and locked, and barred up in his cell. Nay, when he had left the jail, and stood in the free street without, he felt the iron plates upon the doors with his hands, and drew them over the stone wall, to assure himself that it was real, and to exult in its being so strong and rough and cold. It was not until he turned his back upon the jail, and glanced along the empty streets, so lifeless and quiet in the bright morning, that he felt the weight upon his heart; that he knew he was tortured by anxiety for those he had left at home, and that home itself was but another bead in the long rosary of his regrets. Chapter 61.